We got
Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are going to be starting exactly on time, 3:30. And welcome and thank you to everyone who came so in time and so promptly. So my name is Sarah Blau. I'm here representing branches of Beis Rivka, and we are lucky enough to be together with Chassi Rifkin from mikvah.org. And before I introduce Rabbi Gluckowsky, I just wanted to give a little bit of context. Certain conversations are conversations that are not one-time things, but it's a piece in a puzzle. And the same way we speak to our children on different levels at different ages, we hear different conversations for ourselves, different talks, different speeches at different times of our lives, and it's all a piece of one puzzle. A few weeks ago, when the story first broke, mikvah.org put out a podcast with Mrs. Debbie Fox, who's a trauma specialist and expert on child safety. And we encourage you to listen to it. We will send out the link. The link has been going around, but that's one part of the puzzle. One part of the puzzle that we encourage you to listen is to an expert therapist teaching you how to speak to your children, practical advice, how to protect your children. Mrs. Rafika Yarsky and Mrs. Sarah Mrazov also spoke on that podcast, and it's very well-rounded. We spoke with mechanchim and professionals, and everyone felt there was no need to recreate that wheel. It's been done. It's been done well. Thank you, Chassi, for arranging that, and we really encourage you to listen to that. As well, mikvah.org had conversations in general of how to speak to your children about the facts of life, and before camp last summer. So I encourage you to go straight to mikvah.org/audio. Find the topic that you haven't listened to yet, because each class is a piece of this puzzle from a psychologist perspective, from a therapist perspective. And today we are here for another piece of the puzzle. We're here because many of you have been sending questions in, asking for leadership, asking for guidance. So the first thing that I wanted to say is that many of your questions were already answered. Please, we encourage you, please go to mikvah.org/audio. Please listen to it, because that's an important practical piece. That was like step one of this. Step two is many of you asked to hear from a Rav. Where do we go from here? What's our hashkafa? What's our chinuch guidance? What's our perspective? And for that, we have today's segment, which is part of this continuous process where we as mothers are learning so that we can properly educate our children, our Chinuch Expert and Rav, and our special precious neshamas, to keep them as holy and as pure, and yes, as educated as necessary. So we just wanted to make that clear, both Chassi and myself and the school, that this comes in a context. Go ahead and listen to the therapist. We'd love to hear guidance from our Rav. Rabbi Gluckowski is a Rav in Pesach in Eretz Yisrael, the Rav in the city of Rechovot, and he's a mashpia, and he's a guide to many on chinuch, on a lot of different topics. And we want to hear from a Hasidic Rav how we as mothers should be responding to the news. How do we go forward? Or in Rabbi Gluckowski's words, how do we grow from here? How do we use this as a moment to grow both for ourselves, our families, and our children in the right direction? After Rabbi Gluckowski, Mrs. Brower will be speaking, as we wrote on the flyers, sharing safety protocol for Beis Rivka specifically. I am aware there are many mothers here or fathers from different schools. We are all here to hear from Rabbi Gluckowski. You're welcome to stay on as well, but I just wanted you to all know where we're holding, what else is out there. And without further ado, thank you so, so much. I know you're very, very busy. Rabbi Gluckowski.
By me, it's good evening, and by you all, it's good afternoon. I'll tell you, it's a very, we've all gone through difficult, this last week and a half has been a very difficult week for all of us. The issues that have come up, I must say that for myself as a Rav, it's not the first time that I'm dealing with such issues as in the past. and very tragic, and my heart goes out to all of the victims of this whole story. And God should give them strength and give us the ability to be able to help them all, to be able to overcome what's going on right now. But I'd like to start. I'm going to give my thoughts. First of all, we find ourselves, as Chassidim, we find ourselves in the days between Chavdalet Tevis and Yud Shvat. These are days of preparation that we prepare ourselves for Yud Shvat. And I remind myself, as it was Chavdalet Tevis, the time when it happened, actually, the actual day, that it really broke in the harshest way. I remind myself of, there's the famous story that when the Alter Rebbe came out with the Tanya, it first came out in pamphlet form. It was in a written style, handwritten. And because there was a lot of mistakes in the copies of the handwritten Tanya, and the Misnagdim also were doing it intentionally, writing different things into the Tanya to blacken the name of the Tanya. So the Chassidim came to the Alter Rebbe and they told him that they want the Alter Rebbe, there's a need to print the Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe didn't want to print the Tanya unless he had haskoma, unless he would have the consent of two of his colleagues, his friends, the Talmidim, Reb Zusha Anapola and Reb Yehuda Leib Cohen. Like we see in the printed Tanya, that we have the Tanya with the two haskomas there, letters of consent. And the Alter Rebbe sent 3 Chassidim to visit these 2 great Rebbes to ask them for their consent. And when the Reb Zusha Anapola read the Tanya, he said that the Tanya, it will be a ktoiris, it will be incense for all the magefis ruchnius that there'll be until Bias HaMashiach. It'll be a refuah for all the machlas ruchnius, all the spiritual ailments that there will be till Bias HaMashiach. I remember that my brother-in-law, Rabbi Dr. Shagalov from Minnesota, he had a nice relationship with Rabbi Dr. Twersky, Avram Twersky, Olav Shalom. And as a psychologist, he would talk to him and he would have him over every so often in Minneapolis. And he told me once that Dr. Twersky said to him that the only real sefer in Chassidus that is Toidas HaNefesh in a very, very orderly fashion, explaining about the neshama and all about the trials and tribulations that we have in our lives and our pneumiastic avoida and all what it means in the fight that we have between the Nefesh Elikis and the Nefesh Abamis and everything. He says the only sefer that came out from Talmud of the Magid that's Mesuder, just like almost like a psychology book, he said, is the Sefer HaTanya. So for all of us as Chassidim, we always have to realize that God has given us a treasure chest, which is the Chassidus that's been handed down to us from the Alter Rebbe till today. And it's to give us a certain inner strength, to open up our pneumius, our neshamas, to give us a certain inner strength to be able to stand up to all the trials and tribulations that will be going on until Bias HaMashiach. And as we've seen it in the past, in the history of Chassidus, that it's been the Chassidim that have stood up to the most terrible things that have gone on in the world and have stand strong with their Mesiras Nefesh. And of course, that's coming from the limit of Chassidus and from the Hoge Chassidus, Darkei Chassidus, and everything that we have. It strengthens our emunah. It strengthens our betochen. It strengthens our understanding that Hashem doesn't give us more than we can handle. And it also gives us the koiches to be able to stand up to our own frailties and weaknesses and to try to help us in our own personal Mochemes HaYetzer, in our fight with our own personal Yetzer Haras. So as we stand after Chavdalet Tevis and on the way to Yud Shvat, and we were zoich in our generation that we have the Chassidus that the Rebbe has given us, which is custom made for our generation. This is definitely a time that we all have to take more chizik for ourselves. And as Chassidim, one of the greatest ways how we can take chizik for ourselves is by learning and delving in to the Chassidus that we've had in all generations, and especially what the Rebbe has given us. Just this last week, we heard Rabbi Jacobson relate to the situation also, speaking, bringing down a beautiful sikha from the Rebbe that was so pertinent to the situation also, expressing in very clear terms how a chassid looks at things, getting it from his inspiration, from the Rebbe's Torah, from the Rebbe's sikhas. It should be for all of us also, as we stand right now at such a time, a trying time, a time that we look for strength, that we should go into our own treasure chests that we've received, and we should delve into the Torah of the Rebbe more and more. I must tell you all, every day since Corona started, I started to read. Not only do I read 5 letters of the Rebbe in Hebrew every day, but I started to read every day a letter from the Rebbe in English. There's the volumes of the letter in the Spirit. There's the 5 volumes. And I read every day a letter. And I must tell you that I take tremendous strength from those letters in my own personal life, to be able to help people, to be able to have the right perspective on life. And I definitely say as Chassidim, this is a time that to make a good decision, good resolution, that we should have more of a kviyas in the Rebbe's Torah to give us that inner strength. That's one of the greatest treasure chests that we've been blessed with. And we have to take it and use it. And it's custom made for our generation. I'll tell you something. It's not only the Rebbe's Torah, but the Rebbe's heroes that the Rebbe gives us also gives us that strength. I remember when I was a bocher yeshiva, I was 15 years old, and I went into Yechidus to the Rebbe. And I told the Rebbe, I have a problem. I don't have enough consistency in my life. I make good decisions, good resolutions, but I'm not successful in carrying them on for more than a month or 2 or 3, and it fizzles out. What can I do? And the Rebbe told me, first of all, the Rebbe told me like this. He said to me, he spoke to me in English, because obviously he saw it was difficult for me to speak in Yiddish. And he said to me, don't let the Yetzer Hara be so keen. That was his word. Keen. Keen, I think, is like, sharp. Don't let him be so keen. And he tells me, when you want to make a good resolutions, speak it over with an elder bocher, an older bocher, or a mashpia. He'll be able to help you make the good decisions, and then he'll be able to follow through with you and help you to carry it on, to discuss it with you, to hear your difficulties that you're having, to help you overcome your difficulties. Because like we just read recently in Hayoim Yoim, when 2 Yidden talk about a problem that one has, it's 2 nefeshes alikis against 1 nefesh abamis. The Rebbe said, why isn't it 2 against 2? There's 2 nefesh alikis against 2 nefesh abamis. And the Rebbe answered, because my nefesh abamis doesn't care about your nefesh abamis, but my nefesh alikis cares about your nefesh alikis. So it's 2 against 1. And 2 against 1, usually the 2 win. So even that, the Rebbe was giving me a directive. He was giving me advice to help me to overcome my frailties and my difficulties that I was having in my life of lack of consistency. And just like the Rebbe told us now, a Seilach Harav, everyone should have his mashpia. So there's no question about it that when we learn the Rebbe's Torah and we do the Rebbe's directives, that itself gives us the strength to be able to stand up to the different difficulties and trials and tribulations that we have today in our own personal lives and also what's going on in the world, to be able to have that strength to stand up to it all and to live up to who we really should be. Now, I also remind myself of a story that the Rebbe Rashab, when he wasn't well, and he went with the Frierdiker Rebbe to a professor, and the professor was examining him, and he saw how weak he was, and the professor asked the Rebbe Rashab, "Why are you so physically weak? What do you do for a living?" And the Rebbe Rashab said, "I'm an engineer." And he looked at the Rebbe Rashab, "You don't look like an engineer. What kind of an engineer are you?" And he said, "I build bridges." And again, the professor said to him, "What kind of bridges do you build?" And he told him, the Rebbe Rashab told him, that what I learn and I understand, I try to bring it down to my heart, that I should feel it and live with it and bring it into action. So the professor told him, but everyone knows it's two different worlds. You could have tremendous knowledge and you could know, but to bring it down to earth, to bring it into your heart and down into action, that's a different world. So the Rebbe Rashab smiled back to him and he said to him, "That's why I work so hard, because I build that kind of a bridge. And that bridge is one of the hardest bridges to build, because it's a constant struggle to have tremendous knowledge and know and to learn, but not only to know, but to bring it down to earth and to live with it." That's for sure that we see a lot of times people have tremendous knowledge and they can know things. They can be very capable when it comes to the capacities that they have. But when it comes to living up to what you know and to what you know it's right, that's the battle of life. And that's the moyach shalat al alev that Tanya talks about. And that is our avodah for ourselves. And that's what we're seeing, one of the problems that we have in the world. With all the tremendous information and knowledge in the world, it has nothing to do with how people live at the end of the day. And we have to try our best to live up to what we know, what's right. Now, in Tavshin Nun, Shavuos time, the Rebbe spoke a sicha to the Rabbonim. And the Rebbe said that because the Rabbonim come for Shavuos to New York, it's a time to be able to get together to discuss new shilas that have come up, new technology, new scientific inventions. And also, the Rebbe said in the sicha, I'd like to quote something that the Rebbe said in the speaker. He spoke about the different shilas that have come up now today, about preventive medicine, that Rabbonim should learn about it. And then he said, I want to add on something. He says, because of the generations that are going lower and lower, and the darkness of the Golus, there's also all kinds of shilas, new shilas that are coming up in inyonim of refuas hanefesh. What has to do with mental health, emotional health. And the Rabbonim have to be able to know how to paskin on such things and to give the right direction and heroes according to the dinim of Torah. And the Rebbe said it's part of our task to learn more and to find out more what's going on in Inyoni Nefesh, to be able to help and to know what can be done al pi Torah in all instances that we're living now. Baruch Hashem, there are more and more from people, Shomer Torah mitzvahs, that are therapists, that have specialized in different fields of mental health, which is needed very much today. And they discuss things with Rabbonim, and we discuss it among ourselves. I myself personally have put together a therapy center with family and marriage therapists, all shoymei Torah mitzvahs, which we sit together and we learn together and we discuss issues together and the different things that are going on. And there's no question about it that there's a need more and more for those kind of things, to be able to deal with the cheshkas agolus, with the darkness of the golus, which has brought such terrible problems in inyan of brias hanefesh, of mental health, of all the psychological ailments that are going on today that need so much more assistance and guidance and siyata d'shmaya to be able to overcome those difficulties. So there's no question also that when we talk about this whole issue that's come up in every city, country, in every single locality, the local rabbonim, together with the community activists, must get together and discuss things together, how to deal with the issues, how to deal in the best way possible, the most effective way possible, how to help all the victims that have been hurt till now, how to hear them out, and how to deal with the predators at the same time, and to see what can be done for them to be able to get them out of what they're doing, and how to do it in a way that there shouldn't be such havoc, and it should be as effective as possible, and to be able to help and bring your refuah. And of course, to be able to have that open ear for every victim, to be able to hear. Everything should be used as a catalyst. And we have to remember. I remember before I came to yeshiva, my counselor in camp, he's an educator from Montreal, Rabbi Gluckowsky. He knew I was coming to New York from Toronto. I was 14 years old, and he told me, Mendel, I want you to know, you're going to come to yeshiva, and you're going to see a lot of different things, how people act. And they don't necessarily act the way it says what's written in the Torah. He says, you should know that that's what the Alter Rebbe meant when he talked about the Nefesh Elikis and the Nefesh Bahamas. It's a constant struggle. Don't get disappointed. That's what life is all about. People struggle with their weaknesses. You have to stand up to it. You keep focused on what's right and helping and doing what's right, and Hashem will help you too. People have different nisyonis, he told me, different tests. There's different types of yetzer haras. People grow up in different environments. Kol hagodol michaveiru yitzer gadol. You keep focused on what's right. Todas emes, keep learning, take strength, and go further. When he spoke to me, I was 14 years old. Believe me, at that time, I didn't even know what he was talking about. But as I sat in yeshiva and I watched what was going on and slowly began to see, I realized that we're living in a world that's no shleimus, and that we're going to have to try our best to do what we can to make it a better world, and also to be better people for ourselves. For ourselves right now, of course, the first thing is to educate our children for safety. We have to talk about it. This is not something to put under the rug. We don't sweep this under the carpet. We have to talk about our kids. We have to speak to professionals and I've heard very nice talks about it, how to present to the children, how to talk to them about their safety, about their bodies, about not letting people touch them where they're not supposed to be touched, or speak to them in a different way, or look at them in the places where they're not supposed to be seen. And if they feel uncomfortable about one of these things, to be able to tell them to talk, to tell us, because it's not correct behavior. I had this conversation with a number of my children. I told them that there's people that aren't well, and they touch where they're not supposed to touch. Be careful. Keep away from them. Let me know. I remember one of my kids flew to the Rebbe to New York. He was under bar mitzvah. And we asked the fellow to sit next to him. We saw another type of a chassid, not a Lubavitcher, sit next to him. And the guy on the plane tried to start up with him. And my son told him, if you go anywhere near me, I am going to scream on this plane that the whole plane is going to hear my screaming. Thank God he was strong enough to do it. But you know something? It took him 2 years afterwards to tell us the story that it happened. He didn't tell us right away, but he was able to stand up to it. We have to have the conversations. We have to be able to talk to our children. We have to be able to tell them to protect themselves. And we have to talk to the people in our localities where we live, our rabbonim, our community activists. What can we do to make it as easy as possible for somebody to come in and speak? And how we have to be able to show that we believe them, that we hear them. I want you to know this is a big process that we're going through. When I was in yeshiva, somebody tried to abuse me. And I was then about 15 years old, and I went to the Anhola, and I told him, but I saw that they just didn't understand what I was talking about. And I had to go on, carry on further, protect myself. And I realized that people didn't understand what it means. People didn't understand the emotional turmoil that it causes, the scars that it leaves, the trauma. And as I went on years, I began to realize this is a process. It's going to take time. People do not understand how serious of an issue this is. Slowly, thank God, it's becoming more and more apparent. More and more people are aware of it. It's becoming, there's no more tolerance for it. Thank God. We still have a long way to go, because we have a long way to go also how to deal with it, that it shouldn't wreak havoc. We have to really sit down, put our minds to it, how to do it, so that families shouldn't suffer, that people shouldn't suffer, and that we should do it in the most effective way possible. But the first thing is to recognize the problem, to recognize the magnitude of it, the scars, the trauma, what it does to people for the rest of their lives. Thank God we can work on ourselves. And there's ways to help ourselves to be able to overcome the trauma. Some people have it easier than others. It depends on what kind of a genetic makeup you have. There are some people that have that more, that resilience than others. But it's a terrible thing that somebody has to go through. And only there's somebody that has tasted it can understand how terrible it can be. And especially when you're not taken serious. So let our children know that if they tell us, we're going to hear them. We're going to listen. That's a very important thing. And we have to be able to tell them also. Everyone has a Yetzer Hara. It doesn't make a difference how great of a person it is. They can be doing great things, good things, but they still have a Yetzer Hara. And because they have a Yetzer Hara, some people can do things that aren't right. And that we have to be able to tell our children that they should be able to understand and to differentiate, even though it might be a very nice person, but that person might have a second side to him because he also has a nefesh habamis in the Yetzer Hara, and he can do things that are very damaging also because of that Yetzer Hara. And no one has permission to touch us and to do things wrong to us. Another thing that comes to my mind is that when we talk about protection, I want to tell you something. Lately, everyone's asking the question, what do we do with his books? I thought about it. And the more I think about it, and the more I see what's going on, I don't see a place for his books in our homes. He's not an educational model. He's not a person that I want my child to read a book and to identify with him. He left this world very anti-educational. He didn't leave the world with a good story, with a good message. And at the same time, I want to tell you all another thing. There's other things that we have in our lives when we talk about getting out of our houses. If we're living with an open internet in our house without filters, there's a lot of people on that open internet that are even worse than the author that wrote those books. And they're not even hiding how bad they are. We have to remember, when we talk about safety, we're not only talking about safety on the street, we're talking about safety of being careful, not bringing the street into our houses. The Rebbe spoke a sikha in 1954. Rosh Chodesh El, he spoke a sikha to Neshei Chabad. One of the things he talked about was television. And he starts the sikha off by saying that just recently there were 4 Jewish boys that were convicted of murder. And the Rebbe says, and you know where it comes from. A lot of it can come from, as the experts say, from watching movies on the television, how people are killing each other and shooting each other. This is how the Rebbe starts. In other words, the Rebbe is letting us know that what our children are watching, if they're watching murders, they're watching shooting and killings, it affects their minds and it can bring them to that too. So we have to realize also that this is time for us to grow. If it's been difficult for us to put filters on our internet in our homes, this is the time to do it. Because there's a lot of wicked people on the internet. And there's a lot of wicked things going on in the internet too. And it's easy exposure. And our kids are watching it. And I can tell you as a Rav, I have bochrim that have come to me that they're addicted to pornography because of the open internets that were in their homes. And because they're addicted to pornography, some of them have gone further into just pornography. And they've acted out on what they're addicted in. So it's definitely things that have an influence on the way people act. A person can get used to eating junk food. And then it's very hard for him to start eating healthy food. We as parents have to protect our homes, that our children should not be exposed to such things. Because these things influence their minds and bring them to, God forbid, to do things that they're not supposed to be doing too. So when we talk about where do we go from here and what can we do, this is definitely one of the things. I saw recently how in Crown Heights they started the MUST organization. It's great. I give I salute to them. Let's get the technology as much as we can, push it out. That we shouldn't have our children having to use it at such young ages, because it is wreaking havoc. It is causing all the research is showing how much it's wreaking havoc. So it's important for us to realize that the general atmosphere in our homes is what we create. And we have to try our best that our home should be protected. We don't want his books, and we don't want things like that virtual in our homes too. We don't want things that are anti-educational in our homes. We want good role models in our homes. We want our children to be able to drink from pure fountains. The social media is wreaking havoc also. And people come up with ideas and they listen and they hear. All of this affects us. And it's a time for us to take stock on that too. And then I want to say something else too. God, Hashem, has given us halachas to protect ourselves. When we take a look at all the dinim of yichud, the Torah realizes how far Yetzer Hara can go. And it tells us, protect yourself. We as parents should be teaching our children. There's dinim of yichud. Yichud is with an uncle too. Yichud is with a cousin. Even sometimes brothers and sisters, there's din of yichud. You have to learn the dinim of yichud. If there was any time that the dinim of yichud are so modern, it's today. When we see the decay, the moral decay that's in the world. Hashem has given us something that we're able to protect ourselves with. He's letting us know in advance how terrible it could get. So we have to try our best to educate ourselves and our children when it comes to all those laws too. These are things that we've been given and that we could use and that we should use. And these are halachas. And just like we want to educate our children for safety on their bodies and to talk to them about not to speak to strangers, be careful, all these things. We have also a string of halachas of being careful, not being in a place all by ourselves with a man or with a lady and so on. It's the modern yichud of today. And then I want to talk about something else also. All in front of us, there was a suicide. Now let me say something. Suicide is not an option in Torah. You're not allowed to kill yourself. We have to talk about it clear. It's an escape. It's not an option. A person doesn't own his own body. It's also al pi Torah. It's not a solution. It only makes it worse. Hitting olam haba, not just olam haza. There's an afterlife. You're not allowed to do such a thing like that. It's not supposed to be any option whatsoever. This is not a story. This is real life. You know, on one hand, I say one shouldn't be tested. But we have to say it clear. Suicide is not an option. The worst thing possible that a person could do to himself. There's other things. There's tshuva. There's charota, to regret. I'm sorry. I'll try my best to change myself. I'll try my best to help all the victims that are hurt. I'll do whatever I can that I can help them. Killing yourself? It's not an option. Not going to glorify it. God forbid. Not going to justify it. But I want to say like this. We are living in a generation that there's weaknesses. We are living in a generation where there's more depression. We are living in a generation where there's a feeling of isolation. We have to be aware of that. We have to have our antennas up. We have to try to help people.
when we see depression, when we see isolation, when we see people talking suicidal, when we see people talking about death. We have to be there to help them, to befriend them, to bring them professional help. That's not only that. When I was a bocher, I was learning in Kfar Chabad. It was 1975. Rabbi Mendel Futafas called me over in the morning, 7:30 in the morning. Had a conversation with me, a personal conversation. One of the things he told me in the conversation was that there's a bocher in the Zal of the yeshiva, that he's an orphan. He's a yosem. He told me, we need you. I need you to befriend him. He needs a good friend. He told me, he said to me, my name is Menachem Mendel ben Menachem Mendel. I never knew my father. I'm 70-something years old, a yosem, an orphan. I live with it every day. I can't describe it to you what it feels like. It never leaves me, the feeling of being an orphan. And I said to him, I'll do my best. And I walked away and I said to myself, the Mendel Futafas, the giant, the fellow that was in one of the ones organizing all the false passports of getting the families out of Russia, sat in solitary confinement, Siberia, so many years. He tells me he's a yosem, a 70-year-old something yosem that he feels it day by day. Befriend this yosem. That's what he told me. And a year before that, when I was in yeshiva in Ola Torah, Rabbi Sol Friedman Olav Shol called me over and he told me there's a bocher in the Zal that he came from Eretz Yisrael and he's all alone. He doesn't have anyone in the family in his life here in the United States, in New York. Doesn't have a penny to his name, he says. Nothing. Befriend him. He needs a friend. And we became best friends. Believe me, he was an Israeli fellow. I didn't even know who he was. He was from the best bochum until today, even though we don't talk all the time. There's something in the relationship that we have as a friends that has never gone away. People need friends. People need the hug. People need the attention, the affection. We have to be there. And if we see people having the problems, bochrim, girls, high school, seminary, children, we have to try our best because we're living in a generation that it's not so simple. There's a chalishus. Emotional health isn't so strong. We have to try our best to help people. And when there's a need to get professional help. When I was 15 years old, I had a chaver. He tried to commit suicide. I had to take him to the hospital, get the Anhola involved. Good friend of his, thank God, pulled out of it, pulled out of everything. Baruch Hashem, married, family, everything good. I was there all the time because I saw he needed a friend. What I could give him and what I can't give him, we have to try to help people to get professional help. Baruch Hashem, there's ways to do it. There's ways to help. But we have to have our antennas up. We're living in a society. We're living amongst an environment. Let's put our antennas up and be more sensitive towards people. In our educational system. And when it comes to the abuse, to seek the professional help. As far as I know, there are organizations in New York that have been dealing with this in the last couple of years. And to sit with the communal rabbis to sit with Rabbi Ozdeb, to sit with Rabbi Broin, to sit with community activists. What can we do? How we can make our society environment a safer one? What can we do for the victims that they can come forward and talk and feel safe? And what can we do to get the people that are doing this, the predators, to stop? And what can we do to help them to stop, or to just make sure that they're not going to be able to do it anymore? But that I leave for the local Rabbonim to be able to discuss it with the community activists, because every country has different laws and different ways how to deal with things. We have a long way to go to be able to work out a system that can be much more effective. But we got to work towards that, because that's the world that we're living in. And Hashem doesn't give us more than we can handle. And as I say, my heart goes out to all the victims. I know what it means. As I said at the beginning, somebody tried to abuse me too as a boy. And I know what it means when you come forward and you're not taken serious. I know what it means. And I don't want anyone to feel that way. Everyone should feel open enough to discuss it with somebody. If it's a parent, if it's a mashpia, if it's a rov, if it's a community activist. And then we have to try our best to be effective in the best way possible, to get them the help and to be able to stop it, that it shouldn't carry on. May Hashem help that we shouldn't have to talk about these things, because it should be already a ruach hatuma avrim in oretz. But as long as we're still in this golus, we have to face up to the challenge. We have to try our best to do whatever we can, and to use all the koiches that have been given us by our Rabbeim, to have that inner strength to be able to keep functioning, keep going, and to overcome the difficulties. And we should be zoicher ready that the Rebbe should take us out of the golus, and it should be takef umiyad mamish.
Wow. Thank you so much, Rabbi Gluckowsky, for giving us the ICS, the words, the terminology for our children, how to phrase it, how they could look at it, and to really focus on our own growth, our own battle with our own Yetzer Hara. And you spoke so clearly, strongly, and yet compassionately. And we're truly grateful, all the 300 people that are on and the people in Eretz Yisrael that will listen to the recording, that you took this time in your busy schedule to lead us and to guide us. So thank you so much, Rabbi Gluckowsky. Okay, thank you. To the mothers that are listening, if you listened to number 1 to Mrs. Debbie Fox and number 2 to Rabbi Gluckowsky, and you still have feedback and questions, I'm definitely happy to work together with Chasi to produce. We could do a part 3. If there are questions, you could email us at branches@bethrifka.edu. You could be in touch with mikvah.org. We want to be able to provide the answers and the support for all fellow mothers. We are in it together. And now moving on to part 2. This came by request from many mothers in support and in communication with the school. Mrs. Brower will be sharing with the mothers what the child safety protocol is, so that we can go forward and ensure that our children are in safe, trusting hands, and that they are able to focus on their schoolwork and in touch with their neshama and really in doing what Hashem wants from us. So please give your attention to Mrs. Brower.
Thank you, Mrs. Blau. I'm speaking on behalf of the other principals of Beis Rivka. We all feel the tremendous achrayus that every child who walks into Beis Rivka, whether it's a preschool child through seminary, has a safe experience in our school. Over the years, as both awareness and sensitivity towards both abuse and personal safety increased in our community, Beis Rivka has taken many important steps towards ensuring that children do have a safe and successful place to grow. This is both about awareness and also education. So I will be sharing some of the protocols and policies that we currently have in place. At the same time, in lieu of the very difficult recent events, conversations have already begun and a commitment is in place that we will be reviewing our current policies very carefully, making sure that they are being implemented in every possible measure, as well as making sure every staff member is fully aware and educated about these policies. It's of course not enough to have a policy. Implementation is obviously key. I will review quickly the policies. These will also be updated on our website. And again, as I said, they will be updated and modified as need. And we welcome your feedback as well. In regard to staff behavior, all conversations between a staff member and a student must always be taking place within potential view of others. So that means not in a closed door without a window. Also to protect the safety and privacy of the student, also out of earshot of other students and adults. This is very important. A staff member will never and may never forbid a student from sharing a conversation with a parent, even when teachers are telling children that we're going to make a surprise note to mommy for Shavuos. The language used is extremely careful. You are not allowed to keep a secret from your parents, but of course you're allowed to make her a surprise message, and the language we educate our teachers with is very carefully used. Communication between teachers and students is always done via email. We have school email addresses to protect this so that they are also open to review. Any and all physical contact between a school staff member and a student will always be public and appropriate. Any student who chooses not to be touched will always be honored as well. And obviously touch is limited. Will always be gotten from parents as well. Language used between students and teachers is always to be professional and appropriate. Yichud, as it relates to any male staff members, is always in place with no heterim at all. So the full halachas of Yichud are in place with the staff members, the male staff members in Beis Rivka. And then in the unfortunate event that something inappropriate were to chas v'shalom happen, there is a zero tolerance policy in place. Our building is built to help give safeguards to our children. Every classroom is built with a door, with a window. Teachers are told not to block, and we enforce that no window may be blocked. Our classroom doors cannot be locked. A principal or another administrator can always enter a classroom at all times. Students and teachers use separate bathrooms on all classroom floors. Education is a very, very big piece of the puzzle. SafetyKidMikvah.org mentioned Debbie Fox. She gets tremendous credit for creating a curriculum. I believe it's at least 15 years ago. I believe it was brought to Beis Rivka and the other local community schools around 10 years ago, possibly longer. Every year, the students at every age level, depending on what is appropriate, there is approximately a 1 hour training that specially trained from local either mothers or moras come into each class and give a refresher course or a new presentation outlining literally the ABCs of staying safe and going through it, answering questions, etc. Debbie Fox also does a staff training in recent days. We have organized for, rather than wait for spring when the training is normally done, we will instead be bringing this training this year to the winter months in anticipation of many students having questions, especially as they go along the elementary grades. And lastly, again, and this is relevant to as the girls go up in high school, guidance counselors are available to any student who feels the need to share, to talk about something personal or difficult. And obviously teachers are also trained what to do in the event that a child comes to them with information that someone else was inappropriate with them. We welcome any parent feedback. communications@bethrivka.edu will be the central email address if you'd like to communicate to Beis Rivka about this, or of course your daughter's individual principal. And of course, with the tefillah that Hashem himself should protect us all from this, and also that literally we do not have to have these uncomfortable conversations and our children can truly be safe with Mashiach now.
Thank you, Mrs. Brower, for your dedication to all our students. Thank you, Chasi, for hosting. And yes.